Autumn. Autumn. The women in our village were violated day and night by those beasts. When they became pregnant, their bellies were cut open and their living children ripped out. Then they were forced to drink a potion, and pearls would begin to form in their wombs. After secretly giving birth to me, my mother threw herself off the cliffs of despair in the South Sea. That night, a scarlet snow fell upon our village. From within those pearls, bloody, newborn merfolk continuously crawled out. A truly horrifying sight. For 3 consecutive days, new male prisoners have been thrown into my dungeon. Every single one of them had a pale face, their vital essence seemingly drained, looking no different from walking corpses. This was a common sight in this dungeon. Our village is called Pleasure-Seeking Village. Legend has it that a female demon once cultivated here, but became entangled in a love affair and returned to the mortal world. Day after day, she would stand at the village entrance, using her beauty to entice men to seek pleasure, and thus the village earned its name. Later, the entire village was protected by this female demon and specialized in producing a rare type of pearl called Dong Shao. Dong Shao was considered the supreme pearl, exclusively offered as tribute to the imperial family. If an ordinary person acquired just one, they would enjoy immeasurable wealth and prosperity thereafter. However, no one knew that the Dong Chao from Pleasure-Seeking Village wasn't harvested from the sea. Every woman in Pleasure-Seeking Village was a merfolk. For decades, these merfolk women were chained in torture chambers, brought back by men who treated them like animals, defiling them day and night. When a merfolk woman became pregnant, it was also the time for Dong Chao to be born. The men, once their strength was utterly depleted, were thrown into this dungeon. When it was time to transport the Dong Chao, they would be slaughtered to bless the pearl. Dong Chao, infused with human blood, would grow 3 times larger, and its value would multiply exponentially. It was precisely because of these priceless Dong Chao pearls that our village would, every so often, be blanketed in a scarlet snow. Legend had it that this scarlet snow was a divine punishment cast down by enraged heavens and earth. Each time it appeared, malevolent spirits would rampage, and everyone in the village would perish. Currently, Pleasure-Seeking Village was no longer an ordinary village. It was a territory directly under the command of the eunuch commander of the Eastern Depot. By rights, all who knew the secret of Dong Chao were meant to die. Yet in this vast dungeon, there were 2 exceptions. During the last scarlet snow, I did not perish, and so the commander was convinced that I was the fated village guardian. He merely confined me to the dungeon, feeding me well with fine food and wine. The other exception was Uncle Chu, who had been by my side for 10 years. I had no idea what secret he carried, and it was hard to tell. But I knew that for years, Uncle Chu had imparted all his martial arts and knowledge to me. He was practically my adoptive father. I had wanted to formally acknowledge him as such, but he always refused. He would say, "A wanderer like me, adrift to the ends of the earth, has no right to be anyone's adoptive father." Yao Chung, she, how does I so? Each time he said this, he would subtly cover his ankle with his hand. His leg tendons had once been severed by the commander. Now, though he could walk, he had lost all his strength. Otherwise, he would never have been imprisoned in this cramped little dungeon. We thought the newly arrived men would at least be kept alive for a while longer. But that very afternoon, the ominous clang of a bronze gong startled both Uncle Chu and me. It was the Eastern Depot's signal for execution. The commander had once declared, "Heaven-bestowed Dong Chow must be consecrated with blood. A single gong strike to quell vengeful souls." Uncle Chu and I could only watch helplessly as the man was dragged away. He shrieked endlessly, tears and snot streaming down his face. Uncle Chu nearly sighed, then said no more. That afternoon, pleasure-seeking village suddenly became unnaturally quiet, all the soldiers having withdrawn. At times like these, pleasure-seeking village would be free. As long as the merfolk women didn't die, everyone else was free to do as they pleased. 7 days later, the dungeon where Uncle Chu and I were held was suddenly surrounded by villagers. The leader, a man with a Scarface, stared intensely at Uncle Chu. "Brother, if you know any secrets, spill them now. The Eastern Depot is gone. This village is mine to command." Uncle Chu nearly glanced at him with disdain. 2 henchmen tried to rush him, but had their ribs broken by Uncle Chu. Starface's eye twitched, and he finally abandoned his attempt to extract secrets from Uncle Chu. Thanks to that, Uncle Chu and I were also allowed to leave the dungeon. It was then that we learned of a major incident with the recent Dong Chao shipment. From the largest Dong Chao pearl, which was fashioned into an earring for the imperial concubine, a worm had burrowed out. That worm had crawled from the concubine's ear directly into her brain, destroying it. Despite all efforts by the imperial physicians, they could not save her. The enraged emperor ordered the immediate execution of the commander. Pleasure-seeking village thus became a hot potato, discarded and unmanaged. Hearing this, Uncle Chu turned to me and mumbled, "This time, it might be even worse." Yeah. True to Uncle Chu's words, the next morning, I heard agonizing screams echoing through the village. It was the gut-wrenching wails of women, as if they were enduring the most extreme torment. Uncle Chu immediately sprang from his bed, his eyes filled with anguish. In my 12 years confined in the dungeon, I had never heard such sounds. Now I knew these cries were 1,000 times more desolate than the screams of men under torture. When Uncle Chu and I stepped out, we saw a crowd of men surrounding the chamber where the merfolk women were held. A few men had just emerged, one hand pulling up their pants, the other clutching their stomach after spitting out a mouthful of blood. Years of torment had twisted them into monstrous beings, to the point that even during their acts, they would bite and tear at the merfolk women's flesh, until blood flowed profusely. Those poor merfolk women were bound and shackled, naked day and night, no different from machines capable only of gestating Dong Chao Dokta. They wished for death, but were denied it, unless they succumbed to illness or lost their ability to produce. Of course, if they could no longer bear Dong Chao, the Eastern Depot would feed them well for a few months, then dress them in fine clothes and drag them to brothels to be sold. Merfolk courtesans were a rare and coveted commodity, enough to make all men in the realm flock to enjoy them. Thus, the merfolk women of pleasure, seeking village, were born into the most wretched existence on earth, denied even the right to die. Uncle Chu's face was as cold as ice. He pushed me aside, gripped his sword tightly, and advanced step by step. Scarface swaggered over to him. What's wrong? Pitying these beasts? I advise you not to meddle in other people's affairs. If you dare obstruct our path to pleasure and profit, we won't hesitate to risk our lives against you. A group of men formed a circle around Uncle Chu, but maintained a respectful distance, clearly wary of his martial arts. Except for Scarface, the others didn't dare act aggressively. They just stood there, lamenting to him that for all the years, the Eastern Depot controlled pleasure-seeking village. Both men and women were treated no differently than livestock. Now that the Eastern Depot's men had left, if these men wanted to seize control, they first needed money. But after being treated like animals for so many years, where would they get money? These merfolk women were their only way to earn it. If they didn't continue to enslave them, these men would starve to death. Better to let him die than for use men to perish. Uncle Chu simply looked at them coldly. No matter how flowery their sophistry, what was unfolding before his eyes was an act against heavenly principles, worse than even wild beasts. Suddenly, I saw a figure sneak around behind Uncle Chu. Just as I was about to cry out a warning, my mouth was covered tightly by someone else. That person struck Uncle Chu hard on the back of the head with an axe, knocking him unconscious instantly. And then I too was bound by him. For several days, Uncle Chu and I remained bound. For some unknown reason, the villagers still brought us food. I guessed it was perhaps still because of my identity as the village guardian and the secret Uncle Chu was hiding. Uncle Chu looked at me, a rare smile gracing the corner of his lips. Boy, you've been with me since you were in swaddling clothes. Haven't you always wanted to call me adoptive father? Call me that today. Let me hear it. I was instantly stunned. In his eyes, I suddenly read an unusual meaning, as if he had made up his mind to die, which was why he spoke such words. But, having been together for so many years, I knew his character well. Without hesitation, I immediately knelt, kowtowing 3 times before Uncle Chu. Adoptive father, from now on, you are my adoptive father. Uncle Chu nodded contentedly. Then, he suddenly strained, and by some incredible feat, tore through his bonds. Next, he grabbed a wood-cutting knife and strode out. Immediately after, the sounds of horrific slaughter echoed from the window. I mustered all my strength to crawl out, but it was too late. Uncle Chu lay collapsed in a pool of blood, embracing a merfolk woman. But when he saw me crawling out, his lips barely moved. Oh, the shape of his mouth clearly formed 2 words. Run fast. Yo! As I collapsed onto my adoptive father's corpse, there were several other dead bodies around. Even with his leg tendons crippled, he had still managed to cut down 5 or 6 men with that wood-cutting knife. Scarface not only showed no hatred, but instead stared at the corpses on the ground, a savage smile lighting up his eyes. Good riddance to the old man. A few less mouths to feed means less money to share, of course. This cripple was truly a great blessing to everyone. The remaining villagers cheered and dispersed. I stayed to bury my adoptive father's body. It was then that I searched through the items left by the Eastern Depot and learned what a village guardian truly was. Legend has it that every village has a guardian protected by heaven and earth. No matter how great a calamity befalls the village, they can foresee it. At that time, the village guardian would bear the disaster on behalf of the villagers and, from then on, achieve enlightenment. But if the village guardian died, the village would soon be plagued by strange occurrences, and no one would survive. I didn't know if I was the village guardian, but for all these years, despite living in harsh conditions, my body had always remained healthy. The village had suffered several outbreaks of disease, but I was always unaffected. Perhaps this was why they feared me. That night, a sudden sound reached my ears. A woman's voice, quite familiar. The woman spoke, her voice distant. "My child, your mother misses you dearly. Yanani." I jolted awake and tried to clearly see her face in my dream, but she always had her back to me. She called herself my mother, yet said nothing about herself. She only warned me never to leave pleasure-seeking village. As long as I kept my true heart and did not commit beastly acts like those other men, I would surely have food and warmth in the future. I nodded, half believing, half doubting, and waited for her next words. Indeed, her voice suddenly changed when she spoke of the merfolk women in the village. She said they were all ill-fated and hoped I could lend a hand. But before I could agree, the dream abruptly vanished. The moment I opened my eyes, I found my body completely out of control, walking soullessly towards the prison chamber. The merfolk women, seeing me, were filled with terror in their eyes, fearing I would be just like those other men. They had no clothes to cover themselves, completely naked and exposed to the night sky. If not for the thin layer of scales on their bodies, they would probably have frozen to death long ago. As soon as I finished untying them, the village erupted in flames. All the men, armed with wood-cutting knives and clubs, stormed towards the prison chamber door. Scarface spat furiously. "Damn it, you dare run? See if I don't beat you all to death." At that very moment, a merfolk song suddenly echoed from the distant sea. The deep, eerie melody enchanted everyone, making them momentarily forget what was happening. When I regained my senses, a horrifying scene unfolded before my eyes. All the merfolk women stood in a straight line, their backs to the men. As the men stood bewildered, the merfolk women simultaneously twisted their heads 180 degrees backwards. Their neck bones snapped brutally. With extraordinary strength, they ripped off their own heads. Fresh blood spurted from the wounds, showering the men. Everyone was frozen stiff with fear on the spot. And at that exact moment, a somber scarlet snow began to fall from the sky. The night's events left the men in the village completely disoriented. All intended to pack their belongings and leave, especially with the appearance of the scarlet snow, which brought back horrifying memories of the past. This wasn't the first time pleasure-seeking village had seen scarlet snow. The last time, all the pearls in the village shattered, and bloody, newborn merfolk emerged from within them. Their cries sent shivers down one's spine. The villagers didn't even have time to resist before these blood infants burrowed into their bellies, devouring their internal organs. By the time people discovered them, their corpses had been so savagely torn apart that they were unrecognizable as human, a truly gruesome sight. Since then, a prophecy had circulated in pleasure-seeking village. When scarlet snow descends, demons shall appear. Throughout that night, the men could only sit by their doors, clutching knives, standing guard. Yet, after the scarlet snow began, the entire village became strangely peaceful. No newborn merfolk were seen, and no strange occurrences took place. The next day, Scarface gathered everyone. The merfolk are gone, so naturally, the Dong Chao are gone too. Everyone, leave the village quickly, and find your own way to live. The others nodded eagerly, preparing to depart. But just then, the merfolk song once again echoed from the distant sea. Not far from the village, a tower, white as ivory, suddenly rose from the ground. The tower was breathtakingly opulent, with golden walls and jade tiles. Even its gates were crafted from golden silk Nanmu wood. On either side stood a pair of lions carved from solid jadite, and above the main gate hung a vermilion and gold plaque bearing 3 large characters, Myriad, Spring Tower. Ow! Aye! The men in the village stared at the tower, their eyes wide with wonder, speculating endlessly. Could such a magnificent place be a dwelling of immortals? Scarface, in particular, was whispered to have once been a notorious thief, who, curious, had even peeked into the imperial palace when passing through the capital. According to him, even the Forbidden City couldn't rival the splendor of Myriad Spring Tower. Instantly, no one spoke of leaving the village anymore. Scarface stroked his beard, then made a decisive declaration. Brothers, immeasurable wealth is right before our eyes. If we can just make one trip inside, it'll be worth more than 10,000 Dong Chao pearls. Everyone clamored in agreement, then rushed home to sharpen their knives and axes, fearing their weapons wouldn't be sharp enough. That night, at the 3rd watch, Scarface led everyone to the outside of Myriad Spring Tower. He gathered all his courage and roared, "Is anyone in the tower?" For a long time, Myriad Spring Tower remained utterly silent, no one answering. Seeing this, Scarface used the wood-cutting knife in his hand to hack straight at the gate. Oh, the golden silk Nanmo gate let out a whoosh and then gushed a stream of fresh blood. The crowd behind cried out, "It's a ghost!" Scarface stared intently at the gate of Myriad Spring Tower. The gash on the golden silk Nanmu wood gate was slowly closing, eventually becoming as good as new. Just then, the gates of Myriad Spring Tower suddenly swung wide open. Inside, torches blazed brightly, and a group of exquisite merfolk women, draped in silks and brocades, extended their slender jade-like arms, inviting, "Gentlemen, come in and play." With just one sentence, the men outside seemed to lose their souls, one by one, stepping into Myriad Spring Tower. I was about to follow when a white blur flashed past my eyes. Startled, I looked down to see that I was still wearing mourning clothes for my adoptive father. Although I desperately wanted to enter Myriad Spring Tower to understand what was happening, I knew that entering such a place of revelry during mourning was a great disrespect to the deceased. I sat before the gates of Myriad Spring Tower all night, hearing only the ceaseless echoes of revelry from within. By noon the next day, Myriad Spring Tower opened its doors again, but there was no sign of the beautiful women. The men of the village emerged one by one, each holding a large, round, glittering dong, chow pearl. Thus, the men of the village all knew that Myriad Spring Tower was a place of pleasure and extravagance. Yet, in all the brothels in the world, one had to pay for enjoyment. They had never seen a place that gave money back to its customers. The men in the village believed this was their path to riches and completely abandoned any thought of leaving. Night after night, Myriad Spring Tower blazed with lights and torches, the sounds of zithers, songs, and flutes captivating hearts. Even a fierce individual like Scarface no longer displayed his usual arrogance, replaced instead by a fawning, servile demeanor before the women in the tower. Several times, standing outside, I witnessed the men in the village indulging in extreme debauchery. The women of Myriad Spring Tower treated them like dogs, even riding on their backs. Not a few women openly offered prices. If you call me mother, I'll give you a dong chow pearl. If you can act like a dog and bark a few times, you'll also get one. Yeah, there's a proverb that a man's knee should only bend for gold, but in Myriad Spring Tower, a man's dignity was worth less than a penny. I personally saw Scarface kneeling on the ground, twisting and imitating a dog's bark, and he even lay in a woman's arms, whining. My dearest mother, your child wants a really big dong chow pearl. Yada. That woman then held a dong chow pearl in her mouth and fed it directly into his. When the windows of Myriad Spring Tower closed, the sounds of revelry from within echoed out, truly beyond unacceptable. Day after day, the men in the village earned a significant amount of money. The previously imprisoned merfolk women, though beautiful, had lost their charm due to being in torture chambers for too long. Now, these men not only enjoyed pleasure, but also had a livelihood. It seemed they were even happier than before. About a month later, a man from the Eastern Depot arrived. When he entered the village, the men were still fast asleep. Only I was awake. The official frowned and asked me for directions. Excuse me, young man, where was the Eastern Depot's old workshop? I pointed towards it. He hurried away, and when he returned, he carried an official seal that the Eastern Depot had left behind. Looking at the desolate fields and tightly shut houses, he couldn't help but wonder, young man, do the people in your village not farm? I nodded. He asked again, then what do people in your village live by? I pointed to Myriad Spring Tower not far away. They're all in there, fawning over women, living like pampered turtles. The official frowned upon hearing this, perhaps finding my words a bit crude, but with the vengeance for my adoptive father still in my heart, I naturally couldn't speak pleasantries. However, his next remark left me stunned. Myriad Spring Tower. What tower? The place you're pointing to is nothing but a 10,000-foot cliff, isn't it? I pointed at the tower. Isn't it right there? Such a huge tower. Can't you see it? The official looked in the direction I pointed, remained silent for a moment, then turned and left. That night, everything was as usual, but near dawn, I was suddenly awakened by a sound. From Old Man Liu's house next door, there were continuous thump, thump, thump noises. Annoyed that I couldn't sleep, I mumbled a curse and went over to his house, but the door was tightly shut. As I stood before the door, I suddenly felt a small hand push me from behind. I turned around, but saw no one. While I was perplexed, hurried footsteps sounded again. I turned once more, but still saw no one. Yet on the muddy ground, 2 rows of children's footprints appeared. I quickly peeked through the crack in the door and saw Old Man Liu's 2 feet dangling in midair. When I used an axe to break the lock and burst in, I discovered Old Man Liu was dead. Old Man Liu was hanged from the ceiling beam, a dong chow pearl still in his mouth. Only that pearl had a hole pierced through it, as if something had burrowed out from within. Looking closer, I truly felt my hair stand on end. Old Man Liu's room was tightly sealed. There was no way for wind to get in. Yet his corpse hung suspended from the ceiling beam, swaying back and forth. His feet incessantly knocked against the wall, producing rhythmic thump, thump, thumps sounds. If there had been wind in the room, it could be explained as the wind moving the corpse, but now there was no wind, and the body kept swaying, moreover, with a certain force. I had a feeling that something invisible, which I couldn't see, was in this room. Just then, it felt as if someone forcefully pushed me from behind. I spun around so frightened that I screamed, "Oh my God!" On the back of my coat, a small white handprint had appeared. Looking closely, wasn't it the ash from spirit money? I was so terrified that my limbs went weak, and I collapsed onto the ground. At the same time, the corpse on the ceiling beam suddenly fell. The rope seemingly burned through by something. Old Man Liu's body hit the ground with a thud, then bounced up. When it hit the ground again, it was in a kowtowing posture. Old Man Liu's head nodded 3 times on the muddy ground. As if repenting, I ran for my life, only daring to shout loudly once I reached the village. "Everyone, come out. Old Man Liu is dead." After calling out loudly several times, the villagers slowly opened their doors. Scarface looked at me with an annoyed expression. "What are you squawking about so early in the morning? I just drifted off to sleep." I had to lower my voice, my face grim. "Old Man Liu is dead." Only then did Scarface become alert. Itchy. A crowd gathered around Old Man Liu's door, a faint smile playing on everyone's lips. No one ever complained about having too much treasure. With one Old Man Liu dead, perhaps they would get a slightly larger share. I looked at the people before me, but could not sense any breath of life from them. Their faces were pale, their eyes soulless, looking exactly like walking corpses. When Old Three walked past, I even caught a faint, putrid smell of a corpse. I was all too familiar with this smell from my time in the dungeon. A stench of decay mixed with a distinctive sourness. I quickly observed Old Three closely. As he walked, he was on tiptoes, his heels hovering in the air, completely unlike how a living person walked. I swallowed hard and dared not say another word. Without waiting for them to make arrangements for Old Man Liu's funeral, I returned home alone. I sat at home, pondering. Ever since Myriad Spring Tower appeared, strange things had continuously happened in this village, and Myriad Spring Tower itself was the most suspicious. Under heaven, what brothel would ever give men money to take home? I suddenly remembered the official's words. If Myriad Spring Tower was actually a 10,000-foot cliff, then didn't that mean the tower we saw was a ghost tower? I took advantage of the daylight and ran alone to the edge of the cliff. I tied a rope tightly around my waist in case I accidentally fell into the abyss. Myriad Spring Tower was very close, only a few minutes away. I stepped onto the white jade steps, and they were indeed real. This entire scene didn't resemble an illusion, nor did it possess any ghostly aura. It was only when I reached the grand entrance of Myriad Spring Tower that the gates, which should have been tightly shut during the day, suddenly opened. Activating female voice suddenly drifted from within. "Gentleman has arrived. Why haven't you entered yet?" On the 10,000-foot cliff, the strong wind howled ceaselessly. The vast Myriad Spring Tower looked like a solitary ship in a storm. A red carpet suddenly unfurled on the white jade steps, as if welcoming me to enter. The world behind me was still there, yet it gave me a sense of distant unreality. A strange feeling swelled within me. It seemed the path forward into the tower held a glimmer of hope for life, while the path behind was the true 10,000-foot cliff. I placed one foot into Myriad Spring Tower, and the two massive golden silk nano gates, weighing 1,000 pounds, slammed shut with a deafening crash. The scene of blazing torches and lights vanished, replaced by the faint glow of a single red candle struggling to illuminate the space. The room was filled with silks and brocades, and in front a folding screen stood. Through the screen, I saw a woman with her back to me. She was draped in a deep red gown, her figure incomparably graceful. Behind the screen hung a colossal Dong Chao pearl. If the Dong Chao pearls I had seen before were only the size of a bullet, this one before me was larger than an adult's head. A Dong Chao pearl of this size, I feared, was truly one of a kind in the entire world. The woman behind the screen beckoned towards me, and I quickly stepped inside. Her deep red gown slid down, revealing her entire fair, unblemished back. I hurriedly lowered my head, not daring to look further. She reached out and picked up the colossal Dong Chao pearl, then spoke in a resentful voice. "You know the finest pearls in the realm are called true pearls. So, what is a Dong Chao pearl larger than a hand called?" I instinctively shook my head. She chuckled. "It's called a demon core." Ah. The woman said that something like a demon core was unheard of, even in the imperial palace. Under this vast sky, one couldn't say the one before her was unique, but finding a demon core in the boundless sea was like searching for a needle in a haystack. In truth, not just demon cores, but even Dong Chao pearls were rare and hard to obtain, which was why they were so precious. But everything in pleasure-seeking village defied common sense. Those Dong Chao pearls were all malevolent objects. She told me that the reason merfolk were so rare in the world was precisely because of these Dong Chao pearls. Those beasts had imprisoned the merfolk women, defiling them day and night. When they became pregnant, they were fed well. Unlike humans, merfolk could give birth in just 1 month. Therefore, by the 15th day, a fetus and placenta had already formed in their wombs. At that point, they would cut open the merfolk women's bellies, extract the newly formed infant, and then throw a bag of crushed pebbles into their wombs. The secretions from the amniotic sac would continuously envelop these pebbles. The merfolk women would suffer excruciating pain, dying and reviving. But the more they hurt, the more secretions were produced, and the better the Dong Chao pearls would be. The Dong Chao pearls, produced in pleasure-seeking village in recent years, were all forged from the blood and tears of merfolk. As she spoke, the woman suddenly turned around. I then saw her abdomen covered in countless crisscrossing scars, the very places where innumerable Dong Chao pearls had been produced. One could only imagine the depth of her resentment. Her eyes were vacant, brimming with blood and tears, staring intently at me. Although those eyes held a hint of affection, they sent shivers down my spine. Just as I was about to flee, she clasped my hand tightly. In that instant, I suddenly felt a connection of bloodlines. It was then that I remembered my mother was also a merfolk. Many years ago, she had secretly gave birth to me and then committed suicide in this very place. Just as I was about to turn back, the woman released my hand, and my Riyadh spring tower vanished without a trace in an instant. Next to the 10,000-foot cliff was a deep, winding ravine. I looked down and couldn't help but shiver, for inside lay countless pink-hued skeletons. From their clothing, I recognized them as the men from the village. But I recalled the official's words again. That is a 10,000-foot cliff. Yes. I took a deep, cold breath. Fortunately, I had only entered Myriad Spring Tower once and had never committed any acts against heaven's will. Thinking back, those depraved individuals I feared had been transformed into those pink skeletons at the bottom of this ravine from the very first moment they stepped into Myriad Spring Tower. I sat by the cliff, my heart filled with complex emotions. I had originally felt immense hatred for them, but now everything aligned with the saying my adoptive father had taught me. Good and evil will ultimately be repaid. The righteous path of the mortal world is a cycle of change. I walked back to the village, my heart heavy. After all, this was the place where I was born and raised. No matter how absurd it was still considered home. However, upon entering the village, I discovered a desolate and utterly tragic scene. All those zombie-like men were dead, fresh blood still on the ground, intestines scattered everywhere, even still twitching and wriggling. I immediately vomited violently, but this action attracted the attention of a group of people. It was a contingent from the Eastern Depot, their leader dressed in the robes of a commander. Surely, after the former commander's death, a new one had taken office. From now on, pleasure-seeking village would once again be his territory. I looked up at him. He merely glanced at me, then ordered his subordinates, "That's the village guardian. Don't touch him. This old man doesn't want to die so soon." Nesha. How? K. Having said that, he pulled out a silk cloth from his robes and meticulously wiped the blood-stained Dong Chao pearl in his hand. Other Eastern Depot soldiers began searching for Dong Chao throughout the village. Many men, even in death, still clutched the precious pearls in their hands. Without a word, one soldier drew his saber, intending to hack off a corpse's finger to retrieve a Dong Chao. The new commander dismounted directly, kicking the soldier away with a single powerful blow. He glared at the Dong Chao in the corpse's hand. "Damn it, you dare use a blade? If you damage my treasure, 10 of your lives wouldn't be enough to repay it." Then he took a pair of iron pliers, usually used for pulling teeth, from a subordinate. The pliers clamped tightly onto the dead man's finger, and the commander pulled with immense force. The finger was brutally ripped off, fresh blood splattering onto his face. The commander laughed loudly, then licked the blood clean from his face with his tongue and spat it out with disdain. The blood of common folk truly stinks. Not long after, an old Taoist priest, clad in a dark brown Taoist robe, an unorthodox color typically worn by those expelled from Taoist sects, even considered heretics or demon worshippers, approached from outside the village. The old Taoist was gaunt, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent glint. Just one glance from him sent a shiver down my spine. He stood before the commander and nodded slightly. "Commander, that ghost tower over there has been suppressed by this old Taoist's 7 killings blazing fire formation. There will surely be no problems. However, on the night of the full moon, when energy is at its peak, that ghost tower will reappear. Just instruct your men not to go near it." Yea, that. It was then that I understood why that woman had let me go. It turned out this old Taoist priest had sealed Myriad Spring Tower. The commander turned to look at the old Taoist priest. "All the merfolk women here are dead. Do you have any other methods?" The old Taoist priest sneered. "Just bring a few young maidens here, sir. This old Taoist also knows a few secret arts that can make wild beasts copulate with them. Perhaps the Dong Chao pearls produced will be even larger." Hearing this, my blood boiled with rage. This old Taoist priest was even more vicious than the men in the village. And at that very moment, a voice suddenly resonated in my head. "Boy, come find me." The Eastern Depot's men thoroughly searched all of Pleasure, seeking village, not even sparing my home. They used the fresh blood of the dead men to consecrate the collected Dong Chao pearls, then loaded everything onto horse-drawn carts and departed. By midnight, the entire pleasure-seeking village was silent. All Eastern Depot personnel had withdrawn to the neighboring town. That voice echoed once more. "Boy, come find me." My body moved involuntarily, leading me towards the seashore. Behind that 10,000-foot cliff, there was a hidden narrow path. The path was very small, only wide enough for a child to pass, and incredibly steep. Just one misstep would send one plunging straight into the sea. But I felt as if this small path was created just for me. After walking for over 10 minutes, I finally saw the sea. The voice was emanating from underwater. Yet, unlike the merfolk songs from before, this voice was ancient, as if it had endured countless eons. When I stepped into the water, I discovered I also possessed merfolk abilities. I could breathe freely underwater. I swam towards the call, and near the shore, I saw a colossal Dong Chao pearl. It was the demon core I had seen in Myriad Spring Tower. Only this time, it looked much more real, no longer an illusion. As I approached, I could even sense that this demon core seemed to have its own thoughts. Sure enough, the voice echoed in my ear again. "Boy, I am the one who called you." In that instant, countless memories flooded my mind as if the demon core had connected its thoughts with mine. Many years ago, the demon core was originally kept in a place called Prosperous Pavilion. Because the demon core was so astonishing and worldly, the second steward of Prosperous Pavilion grew greedy and secretly took it. Along with the demon core, a book called Heavenly Scroll of Precious Spells was also lost. This book recorded everything about merfolk in ancient times. Merfolk were rare because evil sorcerers and heretics once imprisoned them, cutting open their bellies to cultivate Dongchao pearls. Thus, many began to apply this cruel method to them. In some dynasties, a single merfolk was worth half a city. But due to excessive hunting, merfolk gradually became rare in the world. However, the Heavenly Scroll of Precious Spells also recorded another special type of merfolk. To be precise, these were not true merfolk, but merfolk created by the influence of a demon core. The demon core was a supreme yin object. On the night of the full moon, it would exude a red liquid. If an ordinary person drank it, they could gain the ability to walk underwater and become incredibly beautiful. The demon core was initially a treasure for imperial concubines to preserve their beauty. But some evil cultivators discovered that if young maidens drank the liquid from the demon core, they would gradually transform into merfolk. Thus, the plan to use demon cores to create merfolk, and then use them to cultivate Dongchao pearls, emerged. However, the Heavenly Scroll of Precious Spells did not record whether this plan succeeded. After decades of research, the second steward of Prosperous Pavilion discovered that this method was entirely feasible. Thus, Pleasure-Seeking Village was born in the South Sea region. Afterwards, Dongchao caught the eye of the Eastern Depot, and the second steward was executed by Ling Chai. My mother was also a merfolk created from a demon core. She died after giving birth to me. 이건 뭐야? 억다리는 인생 destination. 이놈하고 슬로우잖아. That day, the sky had unleashed a scarlet snow. Humans possess 7 emotions: joy, anger, sorrow, hatred, love, aversion, and desire. These 7 emotions are the poisons of the mortal realm. That scarlet color was not snow, but something called desire worms. They were born in places of extreme yin when encountering wicked human hearts. Whoever consumed desire would find their desires inflated, eternally lost. The desire worms fell upon the Dongchao pearls, and the bloodstains from the infant's placentas transformed into blood infant merfolk, neither human nor ghost, who slaughtered the entire village. Afterward, the Eastern Depot brought in new people to continue producing Dongchao. My adoptive father's wife also came to Pleasure-Seeking Village at that time. He came for revenge, but had his leg tendon severed by Eastern Depot guards. Though they had healed over the years, he had lost all his strength, which was why he fell in battle while protecting his wife. Once all causes and effects were clear, the demon core slowly spoke. I am the source of all sins. Boy, release me, and the world can find peace. As it spoke, the tide suddenly surged. Fish and shrimp in the sea rushed back to the depths. And boundless suction force pulling from the shallow waters. From the seabed, I saw a brilliant red light ascend. The old Taoist priest was riding the waves on his peach wood sword. Each spell talisman, he dropped onto the sea, stirring up layers of golden light. Although the demon core possessed boundless magic, that was when it was in the deep sea. Now, with the old Taoist priest breaking through the waves, even a demonic creature would find it hard to resist. He flipped his hand, and the sky canopy rod fell onto the sea, stirring up a 3-foot-high wave, and the seawater itself transformed into a set of steps. The demon core hurriedly cried out, "Save me!" Its voice echoed in my ear. I quickly dove into a coral reef to hide. From within the demon core, a treasured sword suddenly shot out, landing right before me. The sword was about 6 feet long, its blade intricately carved with flying birds and swimming fish, glistening with a cold light. On its hilt, 2 characters were engraved. Damnation. Before I could properly examine it, the old Taoist priest launched a spectral claw, seizing the demon core from the air. "Demon! This time, you won't escape. Wait until this old Taoist cultivates you for another 10 years. You will help me ascend to immortality." I had been hesitant, but now I immediately understood. This old Taoist priest was absolutely not a benevolent person. He also intended to use human blood to nourish a demonic object and then refine it to enhance his own Taoist cultivation. While the old Taoist priest was still gloating, I emerged from the coral reef, gripping the treasured sword Damnation tightly, then decided to stab him directly through the chest. The old Taoist priest immediately spewed a mouthful of fresh blood, then struggled to speak. "What kind of demon are you? Not even fearing my sky canopy rod." I coldly withdrew the treasured sword and said nothing. The old Taoist priest died without ever understanding that no matter how profound his Taoist magic, in this world the most terrifying thing had always been the human heart. The moment the old Taoist priest died, the 7 Killings blazing fire formation was dispelled. Myriad Spring Tower once again appeared in mid-air, and from the deep, distant sea, a song echoed into my ear. All the Eastern Depot, men who had followed the old Taoist priest, seemed enchanted, stepping one by one into Myriad Spring Tower. As soon as they entered, the entire tower was covered in Dong Chao pearls. Suddenly, the face of one of them instantly became rigid, and then a blood arrow shot from his neck. From within the dense Dong Chao pearls, countless blood infant merfolk continuously crawled out. Although the Eastern Depot men possessed some martial skills, in just a short while, they were engulfed by the horde of blood infants. When I saw those men again, most had been torn apart by 5 horses, their entire bodies gnawed beyond human recognition. Each blood infant merfolk sat outside the grand gates of Myriad Spring Tower, their vacant eyes staring towards pleasure-seeking village. Their eyes were drenched in blood and tears, whimpering a mournful song. Everyone said demons and ghosts were evil, but who knew that the most tormented was still the human heart? After singing their song, each blood infant merfolk transformed into a scarlet snow. The sea wind blew, and they vanished from this world forever. The insects named Desire finally dissipated into thin air with the departure of everyone. In the shallow waters near the shore, the demon core gradually disappeared with the ocean currents. But as the waves surged, they swept a pile of Dong Chao pearls to my feet. The bloodstains on those pearls had been washed clean by the seawater. I picked up the Dong Chao pearls, kowtowed 3 times before the sea to thank heaven and earth for their bounty. Upon returning to the village, I set a fire, burning everything there to ashes. From then on, there would be no more legends of the demon core, and no more pleasure-seeking village producing Dong Chao pearls. The bones of my adoptive father and his wife I placed in an urn and carried with me. Passing by White Cloud Taoist Temple, I decided to bury their remains there. Adoptive father, you and your beloved could not be together for half a lifetime. Now I have placed you in this Taoist temple, so you may receive the incense offerings and reverence of the common people. I had intended to leave a Dong Cho pearl for the abbot as a token of gratitude. But the Taoist priest of White Cloud Temple said, "Gold, silver, and wealth are external possessions. People only increase their troubles because of it. If this old Taoist accepts your Dong Chao pearl, wouldn't I be inviting trouble upon myself?" Epilogue. 30 years later, in the imperial palace, a scarlet snow fell. From all the Dong Chao pearls offered as tribute, blood infant merfolk once again emerged. After the palace guards slaughtered all the blood infants, they threw their bodies into the capital's moat river. On that same day, the golden Buddha statue of Hugo Temple suddenly shattered, and all the common folk in the city saw a statue of Guanyin Bodhisattva sitting with her face turned inward. That night, the chief of the heavenly censorate received an imperial decree, which read, "The Son of Heaven is unjust. The nation is on the verge of collapse. Demons have appeared." Not so worries. Ahaya. The chief of the heavenly censorate watched the scarlet snow last for 7 days, then ordered all books related to desire worms to be burned. 7 days later, the vast heavenly censorate had no survivors. Only a hunchbacked old man quietly left the city gates. As he exited the capital, the cold wind blew, revealing the face of that hunchbacked old man. It was, in fact, the chief of the heavenly censorate. "No, do. Ingenious.